The morning sun spilled through the cracked windows of a small café on the edge of town. It wasn't much to look at. 2 tables outside, peeling paint on the door, and a faded sign that once read Riverbend Café. But to the people who came every morning, it was more than a café. It was a small corner of hope. The owner, Lina, was only 28, but her eyes carried the weight of someone twice her age. She'd started the cafe after her father died, using the last bit of money he left behind. Every day she served coffee, wiped tables, and smiled at strangers even when her heart felt heavy. Business was slow. Some days she didn't even make enough to pay the electricity bill, but she kept showing up. One cold morning in November, the door creaked open and an old man walked in. He looked like he'd been carved out of the mountains. Rough hands, lined face, and clothes that seen better days. His gray jacket was frayed at the cuffs, and a carpenter's pencil stuck out of the pocket. Lina looked up from behind the counter. "Good morning, sir. What can I get you?" The old man nodded politely. "Just a cup of hot tea, if that's all right." She poured the tea and set it in front of him. "That'll be $2. He searched his pockets slowly, then looked embarrassed. "I'm sorry. I think I dropped my wallet somewhere near the bus stop. I can pay you tomorrow." She smiled softly. "Don't worry about it. It's just tea." He looked up, surprised. "You'd trust a stranger like that?" "Sometimes," she said, "you just know when someone's telling the truth." The man nodded and took a slow sip. His hands trembled slightly, and she noticed a small scar running across his knuckles. "Used to be a carpenter," he said quietly, as if reading her thoughts. "Built half this town 30 years ago." She smiled. "Really? That's amazing." He gave a small laugh. "Doesn't seem like it now. People don't build with hands anymore. They build with machines. There's no work left for old men like me." For a moment, the cafe fell silent except for the sound of the river outside. She didn't know what to say. She knew that feeling too well, trying so hard to build something when the world had already moved on. After finishing his tea, the old man stood up. "Thank you for the kindness," he said. "My name's Eli Turner. If you ever need something fixed, I can pay you back that way." Lina smiled again. "I'll remember that, Mr. Turner." He nodded and left quietly. Over the next few weeks, Eli began stopping by every morning, sometimes for tea, sometimes just to sit and warm his hands near the heater. He never asked for free food again. He always brought a few coins or small bills, and once even brought her a wooden spoon he'd carved himself. "You made this?" she asked. He nodded. "Old habit. My hands can't build houses anymore, but they still remember how to make something useful." The spoon wasn't perfect. It had uneven edges, and the handle curved slightly, but there was something beautiful about it. Something real. She placed it in a glass jar by the counter. Business stayed slow, but the cafe began to feel different. Word spread about the old carpenter who came every morning to drink tea and carve little things for the cafe lady. Some customers started to visit just to see him. One brought her children to watch him whittle small birds from blocks of wood. Eli never spoke much, but every now and then he'd tell a story about the bridge he built with his father, or the tiny church on Pine Hill where he crafted every pew by hand. Lina listened closely every time. One evening, after everyone had left, she sat at the counter, staring at her bills. Rent was overdue. The cafe was behind on payments. She didn't know how much longer she could keep it open. When Eli came in the next morning, he noticed her red eyes. "You didn't sleep," he said quietly. She shook her head. "I don't know what to do, Eli. I'm 2 months behind on rent. The cafe might close next week." He thought for a moment, then asked, "Do you trust me?" She looked confused. "Of course, but Why? Because I think I can help, he said. That afternoon, Eli disappeared for a few hours. When he returned, he carried a rolled-up set of old blueprints and a small wooden box. "What's that?" she asked. "These," he said, laying the papers out on the table, "are plans I drew 30 years ago. A riverside deck for this café. I offered to build it once for the old owner, but he never had the money." Lina frowned. "But I can't afford construction." He smiled faintly. "You don't need to. I'll build it. For free." She stared at him, speechless. "Why would you do that?" He looked toward the river. "Because every craftsman deserves one last creation, and every good person deserves a place where people can gather again. You gave me tea when I had nothing. Let me return the favor." The next morning, he arrived with a small cart full of old tools, saws, hammers, nails, and planks of wood that looked as weathered as he was. He started working quietly at dawn, cutting and sanding while Lina served coffee inside. A few curious locals stopped to watch. At first, they smiled politely, thinking it was just a hobby project. But as the days passed, they began to notice the precision of his work. Every board was measured perfectly, every joint fitted with care. His hands, though old, moved with the grace of someone who had spent a lifetime building beauty from nothing. Even the sound of his hammering began to draw attention. One man from the local newspaper stopped by to ask what was going on. Lina told him the story, how an old carpenter was building a riverside deck as a gift, not for money, but for gratitude. Within days, people began to visit just to see Eli work. Some brought him lunch. Others offered to help. A few even brought donations to support the café. By the end of the second week, the deck was nearly finished. A wide wooden platform overlooking the slow-moving river, with benches handmade by Eli himself. It was simple, strong, and beautiful. When the final nail was hammered in, Eli stood back, wiping his brow with the back of his hand. "She's not fancy," he said softly, "but she'll hold." "It's perfect," she whispered. "Eli, I don't know how to thank you." He smiled, his eyes tired but bright. "Just promise me one thing," he said. "Keep the café open, even when it's hard. Places like this, they remind people that kindness still exists." That night, after everyone had left, Lina locked up and went home. She didn't know it yet, but that would be the last evening she would ever see Eli alive.
The next morning, the cafe door didn't open at its usual time. Lina came running, her coat half on, her breath visible in the cold air. Eli was always there before sunrise, sanding wood or sweeping the deck. But today, the bench where he always sat was empty. His toolbox lay closed beside it. Worried, she called his name. "Eli, you here?" No answer. Only the soft sound of the river moving slowly under the gray sky. She checked the small storage shed behind the cafe. Nothing. Then, across the road, she saw Mr. Hall, the milk delivery man, walking toward her with a folded cap in his hands. "Lina," he began softly, "you might want to sit down." Her heart sank. They found Eli early that morning, sitting peacefully on the bench overlooking the river, the same bench he'd built himself. His head had tilted slightly, as if he'd simply fallen asleep watching the sunrise. There was no sign of pain, no struggle, just a quiet smile on his face. In his pocket, they found a folded piece of paper and the small wooden box he always carried. The inside note read, "Don't be sad, Lina. Every builder knows when the last nail is driven. This cafe, it's not just wood and coffee. It's a place that holds stories, laughter, and kindness. Promise me you'll keep it alive even when I'm gone. The tools in my box are yours now. Keep them near. Maybe one day someone else will need to build something too. Thank you for giving an old man a reason to matter again. Eli Turner." Lina sat at the riverside bench long after everyone left. The note trembled in her hand. The cafe, the deck, the laughter, all of it suddenly felt both beautiful and unbearably fragile. She placed her hand on the wood, feeling the smooth grain under her fingertips, and whispered, "Thank you, Eli." The next few days were a blur. People from all over town came by with flowers and candles. Some cried, others just sat quietly on the deck staring at the river. It turned out that Eli had built half the homes in their town decades ago, but most people had forgotten his name until now. The newspaper wrote an article titled, "The Carpenter of Kindness." They printed a photo of him smiling with his hands covered in sawdust, sitting beside the deck he never got to see filled again. A week later, Lina reopened the cafe. She didn't change the name, but she added one small thing, a new sign hanging above the deck. It read, "Eli's Corner, built with kindness." From that day on, something strange began to happen. Every week, someone would walk into the cafe with a story. A teacher who'd lost her job, a single father looking for work, a student who didn't know what to do with his life. And each time, Lina would find a way to help. Sometimes it was as simple as a free meal. Other times it was just listening. But one rainy morning, a man in his 30s came in. He wore a heavy jacket and carried a small bag of tools. He said, "I heard you're hiring." Lina smiled gently. "Not really hiring, but I'm listening." He looked down embarrassed. "Name's Caleb. Used to be a carpenter. Haven't found work in months. I can fix things if you need help." For a moment, Lina couldn't speak. She looked at the wooden box on the shelf behind her, Eli's toolbox. Without a word, she walked over, lifted it carefully, and placed it in front of him. "These belong to a friend," she said softly. "He'd want someone like you to use them." Caleb looked confused. "Are you sure? They look old." She smiled through misty eyes. "They built this place." He opened the box slowly. Inside, everything was still neatly arranged. The small saw, the wooden ruler, the worn hammer. Taped to the lid was another note in Eli's handwriting that Lina had missed before. "Tools only matter if they're used to build hope." Caleb ran his fingers over the letters and nodded silently. "Then I'll build." From that day on, Caleb became part of the cafe family. He fixed chairs, built new tables, and kept Eli's deck strong. In return, Lina paid him not just in money, but in food and friendship. The cafe began to grow again. More customers, more laughter, more stories. Months passed, spring arrived, and the river shined like silver in the morning light. The cafe was now a local landmark. Tourists came not just for coffee, but for the story of the old carpenter who built a deck with his bare hands and a heart full of kindness. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the sky turned gold, a little girl came up to Lina. She couldn't have been more than 6 years old. She held a small wooden bird in her hand. "Miss Lina," she said shyly, "my grandpa made this for me before he got sick. Can I leave it here?" Lina knelt down. "Of course, sweetheart. Why do you want to leave it?" The girl looked at the river. "Mom says this place helps people remember good things. I want Grandpa to be remembered too." Lina felt her throat tighten. "He will be," she said softly, placing the bird on the shelf beside Eli's spoon and toolbox. "He definitely will be." As the years went by, the Riverbend Cafe became a small legend in the town, a place where strangers became friends, where forgotten people found purpose again. Lina never got rich, but she never closed her doors either. Every morning, before the first customer arrived, she'd walk to the deck, touch the wooden railing Eli had built, and whisper, "Still holding strong, old friend." And every year, on the day he passed, the townspeople gathered on the deck at sunrise. They brought flowers, told stories, and shared tea, Eli's favorite. One year, a reporter asked Lina, "Why do you keep this tradition alive?" She smiled, eyes glistening, "Because kindness doesn't die when a person does. It stays in the things they've built, in the wood, in the walls, in the hearts they've touched." Eli didn't just build a deck. He built a bridge between people. The reporter nodded quietly, unable to speak. That evening, as the sun sank behind the hills, Lina sat on Eli's bench again. The cafe lights glowed behind her, laughter echoing softly from inside. She took a deep breath and smiled. "See, Eli?" she whispered. "They're still coming. They're still believing." The river flowed on,
calm and endless, carrying the reflection of the cafe lights across its surface, like a promise that kindness, once built, never truly fades. The end.